Hi, welcome to session 4, uh, culture and socialization. Those are our main aspects that we're going to look at in this session. So, bless yourselves and let's begin. So, you can have your main reading, you can read Story Kathy, chapter 3, or Gideon's Anthony, chapter 7 and 8, and you should be able to locate these aspects of sociology. So we look at culture and some key concepts of culture. Of course, there are many. We can't explore all of them. We shall take a look at a few. We look at elements of culture, and then because culture is a learned aspect through the process of socialization, then we also look at we have an overview of socialization, its types, and then the agents of socialization, and that will be the end of this session. So let's begin. What is culture? Of course, So simply put, it's the totality of land socially transmitted customs, knowledge, material objects, and behaviors. Of course, from one generation to another. So the children learn a particular aspect of culture from generation to another, or culture can be learned through any other integration mechanism, as we shall see. And of course, culture itself includes values, beliefs, behavior, customs, norms, artifacts or material objects, technology, and there is language and others. Of course, all those that form our way of life. And of course, these we call them elements of culture. And we shall look at these in the next slides in the moment. From you can take a look at them in the next 7 to 10 slides. So it affects the basic attitudes and values, the way we behave, the way we view things, the way we value things, and of course the way we are expected to behave, and therefore the way we behave. So that all this is learned through the process of socialization, and like I said in the outline, we'll look at this in a moment in the next coming slides. So culture consists of all those aspects in form of ideas or objects, so it could be tangible or non-tangible within the society. Things that we can touch or things that we can't touch, all that is part of culture, as long as it influences the way we live in societies. So each people has a distinctive culture, although even in some cases within a particular culture we also have other distinctive patterns of culture, and we'll look at that as subculture, which is part of the dominant culture. So, for instance, preparing food, constructing homes, the way we construct homes, or structuring the family could be extended or nuclear, and of course, uh, promoting standards of rights and wrong as part of the moral obligations within our societies. So people living in the same territory participate in what we call common culture, which is distinctive from other people who participate in other societies. So each culture has its distinctive features that are different from other cultures. Although in some cases we have what we call culture universals. We'll look at that in a moment, where you have different cultures sharing the same unique aspects. But of course, specifically all cultures have their own specific aspects. If you go to DRC or Congo, Republic of Congo, you have different tribes, and each tribe has its own cultural aspects. So that is a common culture, and that is different from other cultures within DRC. Although DRC has its own, people in DRC have their own ways of life, same as Sudan, same as Uganda, same as Kenya, Rwanda, and any other part of this world. So our lives become meaningful to us through culture, not by instincts or me and nature, that is biology, but by learning. So we learn our culture through the process of socialization, because we live with others. So through the interaction process. So again, reflect on our sociological perspectives, and how they view how people live in societies to make sure that they live together, and make the society stable. So we have what we call material and non-material culture, and material culture are those that we can touch. Okay, tangible products could be in terms of physical or technology, and this could include adornments or buildings or weapons. Think about horse, spears, or drums, or cars, or name them. Anything that you can touch, that is a material culture. Food, items, houses, any other raw material. But we also have a non-material culture. These can't be, you can't touch them, but they are part of our culture. Think about languages or beliefs or values, the value that you attach to a cow if you are a pastoralist, or if you are a rich person, the value you attach to your house, because that's how you value wealth. So any kind of governance or communication patterns, that is culture. Okay, living and being a subject under a kingdom, that is culture. Yeah, so that makes it non-material culture. So when you have some time, you may visit YouTube, and then you take an example of what the Karamajongs do. It's one of the major ethnic group in Uganda. And then you see what they do. I've embedded this in your page, so you can watch it from there, or open the link directly on YouTube, and then you can watch what the Karamajongs do, and then you have time to identify those, the material and non-material culture, for your own learning. So let's take a look at the elements of culture. We say that each culture has a distinctive aspects that are learned and transmitted from one generation to another, or from a person to another, and of course these are through interaction, and therefore but of course we are saying that, okay, as while all cultures are distinctive or different in their ways, there are common components that all cultures share, and these are the elements of culture, including symbols, languages, language, values and beliefs, norms, customs. So all these are components that culture share. Okay. So let's begin with symbol. A symbol is anything that carries a particular meaning, and of course people must recognize it. People in that particular culture recognize it based on the meaning that is attached to it, and of course the meaning we attach means the sense we make out of it. If you meet a child who lives in a particular community and they are from a community where they use a drum as a means of communication, even a child would know that the drum is for communication. If anyone, a child or an adult, looks at a guitar or a piano, they would know that okay, this is an instrument for music. So, so any symbol that is attached to a particular culture has its unique meaning. Okay, and that's why sometimes whenever we visit particular cultures, we need to understand the meanings that they attach to particular symbols, because while symbols might these symbols or this material culture may appear in different cultures, the meanings within these cultures could be different. Okay, yeah. So that is something that you need to be aware of. And of course, they are created regionally and vary widely across the globe, and of course, even sometimes within the society. And examples could be gestures, a flag, a statue, whatever meaning that people attach to such a symbol. The second one is language, and of course, it's a system of symbols or signs that allow people to communicate or interact, and it is intangible. So, in terms of vocal, by speaking the way I'm doing right now, or written, what you're seeing on your slides there, in terms of words that have common meanings among all members. Of course, from a linguistic perspective, that's language. So they could include speech, the way people write characters, the way people write numericals or symbols, and of course you would know that we have all different languages on this earth, and uh, people have their own way of writing. So you would, if you looked at the way how Chinese write, if you are used to how you write in English and then you take a look at how the Chinese write, then you would be a little bit uh, shocked by how they interpret those characters that they have, or Japanese, or people from the French speaking, or those who do Spanish. So languages are different based on different cultures, and people from that unique culture would understand themselves based on that particular language. So that's what makes particular cultures unique. Of course, a culture universal. We have culture universals where you have people have similar uh, ways of communication, but uh, cultures use it differently. Okay, so it's in a form of transmission of course the kind of language is transmitted from one generation to another, and that is maintained. And then we have maybe just to talk about one thing is that with culture change, it comes with changes in some aspects, including language. For instance, you'll find that's why you find that in your households you prefer speaking English because you have learned through English rather than speaking your own language. That's why. Yeah, it's the language is transmitted from one generation to another, but through issues of globalization and cultural diffusion, you find that these things keep changing. Now, you can also refer to the social change that we talked about earlier. That there is some kind social change can lead to cultural erosion. So those are the things that we are talking about. Another element is norms, which has to do with rules or standards that guide behaviors in our societies. Of course, those are established to control some to control. how you live. And of course, we shall see more about this in the session on deviance and social control in session 10. So examples of these norms have to do with manners, customs, and laws. Or for instance, do not kill or get pregnant before marriage or respect elders. So all those are part of norms that we live with in our society, because they are meant to control your behavior on how you should live. And of course, so in other words, there are expectations and obligations that are attached to particular categories of people. Women are supposed to do like this, or girls are supposed to be like this, or boys are supposed to do this, or men are supposed to be like this, maybe provide for the household. So expectations and obligations that sometimes, if you do not do it, it could result into what we call sanctions, and these are penalties for those who do not act as they are expected to do, or rewards for those who conform or do as they are expected to do for conducting themselves in a certain social norm as dictated by a particular culture. So while some apply in all situations or people, others may apply to only certain categories of people and vary. For instance, kneading among Baganda is for women, but for men they do not. And while kneading for women in other cultures could be just, yeah, it's part of respect, but while in others you only kneel for elders. Okay, so this is different. But of course, if you go to the Western world, kneading is looked at as something that is exploitative and demeaning the person who is kneeling for another person. So that's why you'll not find it in the Western world. But here it is commonly practiced as a sign of respect. So that's what I'm saying, that norms or elements differ or are distinctive to particular cultures. Uh, just a little more detail on norms, we can classify them or into types, and we have classification by formality. So we have formal and informal, and in this case formal are written down, for instance, such as the laws, the constitution of Uganda, it's a law, proclamation that says you must do this and this, the government shall do like this and this, or people shall act like this and this. It is formally written, and therefore you can be prosecuted if you do not do as the law says. We also have informal norms, of course generally understood by everyone, but not specifically recorded, such as of course dress code. But of course this is changing nowadays. That's why you have a dress code. But in other cases, in generally in your communities, there is no written rule on how women or men should dress, but it is just understood by everyone that a woman should dress like this or a girl should dress like this. So there is no specific punishment for violation of such, per se, that it is that it is held that strict. No, but of course things change. But of course, in if you again look at the dress code, it could be informal but could be formalized within organizations or formal institutions. For instance, a banker should dress like this, or a nurse or a doctor should dress like this. So those are some of the aspects that make a difference. Then we could also classify by the relative importance of a particular norm to society, and these can be categorized as mores or folkways. So mores distinguish between right and wrong, while folkways distinguish between right and rude. So you could look at it in that way, that mores, these are norms deemed highly necessary, and therefore could relate to the formal classification, as we have said up there. So this could result into strict sanctions or punishment if you do not do according to such, and this can in legal terms we can look at this as felony. So a felony which deserves, for instance, capital punishment. You killed someone, therefore by law you are not supposed to kill someone, take someone's life, therefore you deserve life sentence or a death penalty. So you see that. While folkways are those that govern everyday behavior, such as if such that are violated, then you do not a person does not get a serious punishment, just like someone who has committed a felony or a murder. So in this case, from a legal perspective, we term this the violation you get. You've committed a misdemeanor, and of course, the sanction can result into, for instance, community service. You have seen in communities where someone steals another person's chicken, and then they say, okay, you are going to work on this road, your punishment is to clean this borehole or maintain the road for a month. That's the community service we are talking about. So that's not a very serious sanction or penalty. So that's in simple terms the difference between those classifications. So another element of culture is values and beliefs, and of course these are standards by which people assess desirability, or right and wrong, or good and bad, or beauty or not beauty, or so looking at those, that what is desirable or not desirable, or proper or improper. So they influence behaviors, and of course they have a direct relationship with norms and sanctions that we've just talked about. And they provide a broad foundation to beliefs. So of which beliefs are those statements that people sometimes hold to be true. They are just ideas, and therefore, as we said, that's part of the non-material culture. So it could be ideas of what is desirable or worthwhile in life. For instance, Muslims are supposed to dress like this. You are supposed to take yourself like this as a Muslim. If you do not, then Allah is going to punish you in this way. So you see, those are beliefs. Okay, yeah, because if you dress like this, you are a Muslim, then that is right or wrong, or good or desirable or undesirable according to the Muslim religion. Okay, so these guide people's goals, choices, and judgments. Okay, so you are motivated. Okay, Muslim, I must go to Mecca if I grow up and get, so those are some of the things that relate to beliefs and values. So of course there is development of culture around the world. If we said, okay, culture keeps evolving, or social change evolves everywhere, and of course as it evolves, we accumulate what we have in common among different cultures. So all societies have developed certain general practices, for instance, and then we call these culture universals. For instance, adaptations to meet essential human needs, such as need for food, shelter, clothing. In every culture, there is that particular standard that people must eat. In every culture, people must have shelter, people must dress, okay, in any culture. So those are called culture universals because they apply to every culture. Then we have, of course, culture that may change or expand through the process of innovation and diffusion. So if that happens, then we term that as culture change. If particular culture, elements of culture keep changing or evolve, then we term that as culture change. It could be in terms of language, it could be in terms of beliefs, it could be in terms of technology. That is all culture change. A shift from using hose as digging materials for used in cultivation towards using machines, tractors, and the rest. So that is culture change. And of course, it's continuous. Culture change is continuous, and it changes in every society. Example could be change in family life in African cultures, from extended families towards nuclear family, or more women going to work in a formal setting rather than staying home to do household chores, or some delay into marriage because now women are more into working and education, but before they would get married at age 13, because that they had to now again establish their families and do what they are supposed to according to the obligations and expectations of their culture. But things are now changing. And of course, once married, you can divorce. Nowadays in Africa, compared to the days before that, if you get married, you don't go back. So, but now things change because of such cultural diffusion and changes, and of course. The system-wide connections, which we can also refer to as cultural integration, such as through cross-cultural aspects of globalization, people intermarriages. So that is cultural integration because you have particular patterns that are now working together across different cultures. But there is also some elements of change that happen faster than others within particular cultures, and therefore leaving some inconsistency that the culture would not shift wholesomely, that there are aspects that would remain behind, and that is also is termed as cultural lag. While some cultures would expect some elements to evolve, some other aspects of elements would lag behind in terms uh, uh, of change. For instance, while people would accept that through education you get skills and knowledge, and therefore be able to use new technology, there are within the same culture there are other aspects that people would not accept to change because that they would be in violation of their beliefs and values. So that's what we can term as cultural. And of course, if we look at more, if we look at some of the factors that would lead to culture change, can happen through innovation or discovery or diffusion. And by innovation, we mean a process of introducing new ideas or objects into culture. It could be in terms of technology or in terms of uh, ideas on how things should be. This could be through discovery, or it could be, for instance, making known or sharing existence of some aspects, such as astronomy. Before, we think that okay, the God is in the heaven beyond the clouds, but then with astronomy, new things happen that we know now. There is a whole galaxy out there, many planets just. So that is innovation and discovery, or through invention. Existing cultural items are combined into form of to make new things. For instance, invention of internet, automobile, or democracy from a political perspective. Okay, rather than monarchy or dictatorship. So culture can also happen through cultural diffusion, for instance, through military conquest or missionary work, or you studied about explorers, or tourism, or mass media and internet. You discover new things, especially now that we have internet and Facebook and social media. One doesn't need to travel to Indonesia or or Morocco or UK to know what they do in UK. You can just know it by through your phone or any gadget, and then you can some people practice those although they are not part originally part of their culture, then they start appreciating them, and they learn to practice them. There is also culture technology, which has to do with culture transformation, about how to use particular material resources within the environment. And this can happen through culture diffusion. So, for instance, your phone for communication as a substitute for other ways of communication traditionally. Of course, culture change could also be as a result of globalization, and of course, this is worldwide integration of government policies and cultures, and social movements, marketplaces, and the rest. And think about the human rights that apply to every other individual. But of course, does not necessarily that all those aspects would be um, integrated in some cultures, but at least these apply to all. Or think about the new sustainable development goals by the UN that are encouraging every country to practice or get involved in. So these all these could lead to culture change. So some key concepts of culture, like I said before, we cannot complete all of them. There are many, so you have time. I showed you can visit the glossaries of the main readings of Anthony Giddens. You can take a look at all these different key concepts. So one of them is subculture, and subculture looks at those patterns that set apart a particular segment of society's population, maybe youth or women or men, or particular movement, disabled people trying to advocate for their rights, something like that. So those patterns that set apart some of the segment of individuals within the dominant culture, and sometimes they are influenced by age or ethnicity or residence or sexual orientation or occupation. Yeah, I know we are not supposed to be talking about this in a religious, a conservative religious community. For instance, you could have homosexuals, the gay, and so those could be part of a particular dominant culture that does not allow or believe in such sexual practices. So the dominant culture is that cultural pattern that is for the larger population. So if you have other aspects that are different from the dominant culture, then that qualifies it to be a subculture. Okay. Then we have what we call counterculture, and this has to do with strong opposition of the widely accepted culture or the wide dominant culture. And of course, though some groups conspicuously or deliberately oppose the aspects of dominant culture, especially in this era of human rights. Before, for instance, we used to be beaten when we were growing up in the past century, but with the introduction of these human rights and advocates for human rights, I mean, you don't beat a child. Think about those aspects that are being opposed by communities within cultures. Or think about the political change in terms of governance, that people who used to believe in kingdoms, that you live under the rule of a king. Things have changed with the introduction of democracy and rights. So that kind of opposition. So there's that kind of questioning the morality of the majority group. So sometimes you'll find that people are engaging now in the form of protest activities, and sometimes resulting into violence and conflicts because of that kind of opposition of the other dominant culture. So that is counterculture. Then we have what we call culture shock. Um, this is experienced when a person feels disoriented or uncertain or out of place, even fearful. Sometimes when they encounter um, unfamiliar culture, and examples could be, for instance, Americans or Europeans who comes to visit a person in Uganda and goes to Teso region or Ankole region or Kabarit or areas in southwestern Uganda and wants to drink something, drinking, alcohol, and then they are given Ajono in Teso region, or Tonto in Ankole region, or in Tudiri in Kabarit Soro region, they would be shocked because for them they are used to drink beers, drink beer which is very well processed through industry, and then it is packed and it is even preserved. But for us here in Uganda, our traditional drinks, alcohol drinks, are just just it's nothing like preservative or anything or packing, a special kind of packing. Okay, or a Muslim from Middle East who is conservative and used that kind of behaviors that are expected from a woman, and then they go to Europe or America and they see this woman who is dressed openly and displaying with open displays of affection. That would be a shock. But of course, so that is a culture shock. Okay, so things change. Oh, in terms of food, what people eat, sometimes we all, because for us we know here eating, you eat livestock, things that you domesticate, cows, goat, chicken, and the rest. But sometimes we get shocked when you see people in China eating snakes or anything. Okay, so that's a culture shock. There is also what we call cultural inertia or cultural lag. I already talked about it before. This has to do with some kind of confusion or disturbance or alienation when the non-material culture is still struggling to adopt the new material culture. Examples could be, for instance, you consider ethics or issues of privacy when using a phone or internet. I mean, in some ways, just okay. If the phone in a family, so you have okay, um, there's nothing like these things of privacy in our tradition, okay, especially among the young ones. A parent has a right to see whatever you are supposed to be doing. But nowadays we have that kind of, uh, of privacy, that as a human being you have a right to privacy regardless of whether you are a child or mature. So those are some of the things that would okay, so your parents would in that case be struggling to accept the idea that okay, this is now the idea of privacy, so I'm not supposed to be touching my child's phone because it is, even if they are the ones who bought it for you. We have culture universals. I already talked about these. These are elements common to everyone. For instance, funeral rites or cooperative work. We have cultural diversity or variation, that different cultures have unique aspects and different aspects of or elements of culture. For example, Africa has hundreds of tribes with some cultural universals, but also with many differences. As you know, just reflect upon the tribes you have in your country, and then look at those different tribes that you have and how unique they are. So that is cultural diversity. Some other key elements, we have cultural relativism, which has to do with the practice of evaluating people's behavior from the perspective of your own culture. And of course, examples could be cultural sensitivity related to international entrepreneurial ventures, uh, even if it is amusing, but then some practices such as child labor are deeply disturbing because that shouldn't be uh, happening. So that kind of cultural sensitivity that you have towards a particular culture, that's cultural relativism. So trying to understand uh, how other cultures are. We have ethnocentrism, which has to do with it also, of course, relates to cultural relativism. So it has to do with uh, the practice of judging other cultures by the standards of one's own culture. But of course, now this one is biased, assuming that one's culture is superior to others. For instance, Americans and Europeans viewing Africans as primitive or backward because of our differences between cultures, while from a xenocentrism way, we a xenocentrism way we tend to also culturally based on tendency to value other cultures more highly than ours, trying to appreciate other cultures that they are better than us. So, for example, in Africa, it is often assumed that American, European products such as shoes, clothes, and other artifacts or modern styles are better than those that are made in Africa or locally, or nowadays, better than those that are made by China. So that's why you'll find, okay, this is Chinese, this is Chinese. So trying to say that, okay, things from America are better than those in from China. Then we have stereotypes and prejudice. Of course, cultural relativism and ethnocentrism sometimes result into creation of false images, bias that sometimes could result into real consequences. So you have stereotypes which are also cultural labels or cultural stereotypes. These are unreliable generalizations about all members of a particular culture or tribe, and of course they are grossly they some in most cases distort reality. So for instance, assuming that all rap artists are uneducated or are thugs, um, that all Muslims are terrorists, but that is not true. That all women are weak but men are strong, that is not true. Or that women are bad drivers. You always hear most Ugandans here say, so when a man is driving on the same road and then there's this woman who keeps then the other men in another car, you hear them saying, okay, it is a woman who is driving. So meaning that there's that generation that all women are bad drivers, but that's not true. um, so among other gender related stereotypes. And of course, so prejudice has to do with that cultural bias that relates to rigid and irrational generalization about the entire category of people, which could be positive or negative sometimes, but of course vary in intensity. So example could be that all Russians are intimidating or all Banyangwale men are arrogant. So those are you'll see that these stereotypes and prejudice are related. And of course, we have other key issues that relate to, of course, to sociology and culture and social development. And one of them is also ethnicity. This is cultural heritage shared by a category of people, which is also known as a ethnic group. And of course, uh, example could be the Jews and Spanish-speaking people, Latinos in USA. Those could be examples of ethnic groups, or Rwandese, or Indians, or Somalis, etc. That are these are considered ethnic groups in Uganda. And of course, this is different from race because while while ethnic groups are set apart by particular distinctive cultural elements, a race uh, is is constructed based on the biologically transmitted traits, which are sometimes physical in terms of color, hair texture, or shape, or facial features, or body shape. So you have all those physical attachments to a person, while for ethnicity those are cultural aspects or social aspects. So examples of race could be, okay, whites or African American or Latin Americans or Asians. These are considered racial groups in the US because these uh, different groups portray different physical features on their bodies and the rest. And of course, this sometimes leads to what we call racism, which is a form of prejudice, a belief that one racial category is superior to another or inferior to another. And that's what is happening, for instance, in the US, and that's why you find that there is more inequality between blacks and whites because of this kind of racial prejudice. So I implore you to do some more readings on culture, of course, basing on the major, relate them to the major sociological perspectives, and you can discuss the implications of culture and its elements in society. For instance, if we talk about norms, functionist mates would say norms reinforce social standards for conflict. From a conflict perspective, norms reinforce patterns of dominance between different groups, but from interaction perspective or symbolic interaction is norms are maintained through face-to-face interactions, through a reinforcing socialization process. So that's the learning process. So that is all about culture. But then let's now look at how culture is learned or transmitted from one generation to another, or from particular groups to the other through the process of socialization. But you could also take a look at these discussion questions for your own uh, personal readings and personal learning in your own groups or at your own free time. So let's look at socialization. So we've said that culture is learned, and therefore is learned through a long life process or lifelong process, and that is uh, termed as socialization. And of course, it's a complex process that sometimes it is complicated on viewing at how people get to learn things. Could be through experience or education or uh, coercion by policies, as we shall look at the agents of socialization. So it's a process by which individuals learn how to interact with others, but also become members of society. Becoming a member of society, that you're practicing what the culture wants you or requires you to practice. And of course, so in other words, it's a process by which we adopt or learn the culture of our groups or those in our societies. So that's basically what socialization is: process of learning, way of life, because way of life is our culture. You can take this an example of this daily life. Let's see if this could open and see if we can just take a quick look at how culture is learned. Okay, I do hope it opens. Let's skip the ads and see what comes up. So you can also look at all these, the life of all these videos. So you can so this is daily life of a girl child in who is called Akelo in this video in one part of the area, one part of the culture in Uganda. So you can see you have other lives. If you get time, you can watch all these, see how life goes on. So let's return to our so if, as you've seen, we talked about socialization as a learning process, and you've seen what, for instance, this guy is doing. She wakes up in the morning. She knows she has to do this and that, and then she has to go to school. At school, she plays and exchanges and interacts with others, and of course, in that process, she's learning new things. And then she comes back home. She's feeding the life, the poultry, and then she has to cook. So in that culture, that is how they are expected to be doing, and that's the learning process. Meaning that even when she gets married, she knows what to do when she gets into marriage, and then when she gets married, she produces also a girl. She's transferring or transmitting that particular culture or what she has been doing or what she did in her childhood to the new child, and that is socialization process, learning culture through from one generation to another. So what does socialization teach us? It teaches us language, it teaches us norms, values, and beliefs. It teaches us to understand others. It teaches us how to understand ourselves as social beings, or as part of that we live in groups or among groups. And then of course it teaches us the emergence of the social self. We are in a moment, we are looking at theories of socialization. And of course, we are talking about that culture. Socialization has to do with teaching us the social self. So, but the self is the dimension of the personality composed of the individual self-awareness and self-image. So, the self is inseparable from the social experience, because whatever we learn as individuals is part of what the society expects us to do, or how we want to appear within a particular social group, to be part of that group as members. So we have there are several theories of socialization, but here we look at more that those look at the self. So one is by Herbert Mead, who looks at the development of the social self. Another one is Charles Cooley, who looks at looking glass self. So Herbert Mead argues that the social self develops out of social interaction with others, because we interact with others on the daily life. And this social interaction involves seeing ourselves as others see us, or taking the role of the other within a particular group under which we are members. And of course, the taking of the role of others involves a constant interplay between I and me. Okay, the inner you and I, and I, and the I within a particular social group, or who am I. And that's why you'll find, for instance, one of the African traditional saying of Ubuntuism, or working together, so that I am because we are, or we are because I am. So there's that part, someone considering themselves as part of a particular group, that he is because of a particular group, but also the group is because of who they are in that particular group. And of course, Mead gives those three components of the social self, that the I is a subjective element of the self, which involves direct experiences of the self and develops without language. So you are who you are because that's how it is. But there is also the me, which is the objective element of the self, which involves how one individual, or how you look at others and see yourself, uh, and this develops through with language. Therefore, the learning process comes with the me. Okay. Then there is the mind, which takes the role of others, the interplay between I and me. Um, uh, Taking the role of the other, or the significant other. For instance, when children take the perspective of those who are most important in their lives, so considering them as role models, okay, or performed through use of language or symbols in intimidation or modeling, uh, role playing. Okay, when I grow up, I want to be like so and so, because that is a person whom you look up to, that they are doing what you would want to become as a person. So that's the social self, through imitation. Someone you're learning that you want to be like your brother because he's now a doctor or engineer, okay? Or you want to become a social entrepreneur because you have seen the impact that certain social entrepreneurs are doing in society. So you want to be like that person. Then there is the self-generalized other. For instance, when children take the roles of several others at once, performed through participation of children in complex games or sports. Okay, so children learn the shared expectations of the entire group. For instance, you see, so that child participating in the activities of what their mothers do at home. For Cooley introduces the aspect of the looking glass self, which involves patterns to the self image that we have based on how we suppose others perceive us. So we act according how we think other people look at us. So we imagine ourselves in the same way that others see us. Okay, oh, I'm going out, for instance, I am going to dress like this or like this, but then how would the public look at me if I did that? Okay, so others represent a mirror in which we can see ourselves. Okay, so as a man, how am I supposed to behave in the community? Or as a woman, how am I supposed to, how would others look at me? So that's the looking glass self that Cooley is looking at. So the idea that the person's self-conception is based on the response of others. Okay, so those are basically the few that we can look at, but you can read more about theorization of socialization. Okay, so let's look at the types of socialization. And we have, for instance, primary socialization, which occurs mainly at home, because that's when a child is born, the immediate contact social unit that they get into is a family. So primarily the first things they learn are at home. That child that we saw in the video definitely learned how to do whatever she was doing at home. Yeah, but of course, so this occurs without the subject's knowledge of it. So you just start doing things. Of course, initial socialization by primary takers, you saw the girl child living with the mother. I don't know whether it's a mother or grandmother, but definitely whatever she was doing, she has learned it from that woman. Okay, they live together. But also there is secondary socialization, which is purposeful, and of course sometimes, for instance, it takes place at school. And So that follows whatever you learn at home, then other you learn other things at church or at school or within the community as you interact with others. So that is secondary socialization. Then there is anticipatory socialization, which is completely meant to prepare for future roles and statuses. So a person rehearses for future positions or occupations or social relationships. So a girl learns how to cook because they know in future they'll get married, therefore they must cook. Must, if in the traditional way, but not in the in the modern social life. It's not a must that women must cook, okay, because they are also now working, so they can afford to hire other people to work for them. Or you are training to as a social entrepreneur, so that in the near future you start your own business or you start an NGO to help other community members. So this is anticipatory socialization that you are doing right now at school. because you're preparing yourself for future occupations or whatever you want to be or become in future. Then there is reciprocal socialization. For example, when you find children training their parents on how they are supposed to do things. Take an example with the current era of using smartphones. So you buy a smartphone for your mother or father, and then you have to teach them how to use it as a mode of communication, which is different from what they were using when they were young. Okay. There's what we call resocialization, which is the process of unlearning the old norms or any cultural aspects, and they are required in one's new environment. So a person here through resocialization, the person has to learn new things, and therefore discard what they already learned through the other processes of socialization. Uh, Sometimes they look at it as radicalization, if you have heard that term, radicalization, or re-education, especially for instance in military or anything. For instance, during World War One, there was this concept of Hitler's assumption that people should be re-educated, or even in 1960s, 70s, after Vietnam War, some members of South Vietnam were put under re-education camps that the North Vietnam wanted them to learn communism, while the South had been fighting to do to avoid communism. So that's some kind of the resocialization that we're talking about, and this happens in total institutions. Examples, prisons or asylum or in the military. So a total institution in that case is a setting or a place in which individuals are isolated from the rest of society, and they are set to live in completely controlled environment by either officials or administrators of particular institutions. And sometimes these are called rehabilitation centers. You can take an example of those, the Campirincha prison, Campirincha, which is a children's prison in Uganda, so that people can learn new ways of how they are supposed to live. And of course, the three distinctive qualities of total institutions: they are controlled, and the residents are subject to standardized activities, and they apply to formal rules and rigid scheduling. Think about how the training is done under police or the army. But of course, sometimes in the extreme cases of rehabilitation or institutionalization, some members may become more independent on the social institution, and therefore they are unable to function outside that institution, and that is known as institutionalization. Um, so other than that, okay, if we've said that socialization is a process of learning, way of life, then there must be institutions that are, or agents that influence such kind of learning, and these we call them agents of socialization. And an agent of socialization can be an institution or group that prepares an individual for social life and society, and these include family, schools, peer groups, religion, workplace, state, government, or marketplace. All those are different institutions. If you remember through our previous sessions, we termed these as social institutions. So let's begin with family. So how does the family help in socialization process? Because it's like I said, when we're talking about the primary socialization, said the family is the most important agent of socialization. It's the basic unit. It's where socialization begins from. because it stands at the center of a child's life. So the child resides there, they grow from there. And of course, for instance, a child would speak the language that the household members are speaking as the first language. Okay, so it's a lifelong process of learning that begins at family level, because that's the immediate social environment that the child go through. And of course, it provides the basic needs, food, shelter, and so on. And it teaches the child skills. For instance, you saw that child in the video cooking. That is a skill. It passes on to the child the social position or places them in the society, that you are a girl, you are supposed to be like this. So it gives the child a particular status. Okay, so it teaches also basic norms and values. You should not do this, you should not do that. And of course, you are also a child is also punished if they do not rely, or if they do not do as they are expected to do. Okay, uh, so these days they don't beat children, but for us they used to beat us. I remember, but these days they tell you, okay, you are under detention. I mean, detention, that is one way of a sanction. Or they take away your phone or other gadgets, or they deter you from watching television because you have done something wrong. So you see, families also have particular sanctions. Because that's the way of reinforcing that you have to learn particular norms and values of everyday life. So it socializes children into gender roles. Okay, for instance, if a young boy sees his father going out to work every day and taking the role of a main of the main wage, so in future this boy grows up knowing, okay, I have to take care of, I'm the man of the house, I have to take care of the household. Okay, so that's how family socializes children. Two is schools. So the school is the second, is another part that or another agent that enlarges the child's social world. As for instance, you were seeing that child when from home she went to school, and therefore she was learning new things from school through interactions with teachers and of course with other fellow students. So formal school teaches children a wide range of knowledge and skills, of course, and therefore turning you into a teacher or engineer or lawyer or whatever you have to become. So school is the child's second experience with bureaucracy. Bureaucracy have to do with the component of formal organization in which rules or hierarchical ranking are used to achieve efficiency. So the school teaches you how to, for instance, to become a good public administrator, because that's how bureaucracy is, or how to follow rules within the organizational structures. And of course, it socializes children also into gender. So the school reinforces some aspects of cultures at home. Third is the peer group, which is a social group whose members have interests, position, or age in common. Could be schools students in secondary school or at university, or could be another group of men in particular age who shares a common goal, or could be a group of academics, or it could be a group of women. Or so think about any that have a similar common goal. And of course, peer group socialization typically occurs outside the context of adults. Supervision in some cases, that you have control, some level of control. An individual has some level of relatively some level of control to do what they are doing. So there is this role of others as apart from the family or school, which result into having a peer group influencing individuals on some age. um, yeah, sorry about that. Just trying to um, yeah, to correct this. Yes, so sorry about that. So let's continue. Um, so a major feature or operative during adolescence is referred to as, for instance, anticipatory socialization, because these peer groups also help you to prepare for future positions. Okay. So the peer group provides young people, for instance, the experience in developing social relations, can ease the transition from primary, I mean, from young to adult responsibilities, because you do things together. So you have a group of this girl who are doing some things together that women are supposed to be doing at a later stage. Then you have, they can be a source of harassment as well as support sometimes. Yeah. Like bullying or social support of a particular group. Maybe you're a group of girls and you have this common goal that you want to go to the university, learn and become engineers. Then you start supporting each other. Or then you have, it provides the opportunity to discuss interests not shared by adults, because adults have their own perception. Also provides a sense of belonging that eases the anxiety of breaking away from family. For instance, you leave family and you start working after graduation, you have to start living an independent life. But then you find these peer members that would give you social support. There is also mass media and technology, and of course, mass media as a means of interpersonal communication, um, directed to a vast audience. So individuals tend to use television, newspapers, radio, and the rest. Or you think about any other electronic gadgets such as smartphones. But of course, these days, television and smartphones have become more dominant, that children tend to forget what they are supposed to do or expected to do according to particular cultures or family. So they tend sometimes to forget obligations that they are expected to do. But of course, that is part of life. So mass media and technology spreads information on mass scale, and then therefore people tend to learn from that. It influences attitudes and behaviors through images and messages that you, for instance, are portrayed, let's say, on Facebook or Twitter. Of course, mirrors our society's patterns of inequalities, because take an example, you have in some most cases, of course things are changing now, but before you have more women being used on adverts because of certain perception that they appear, that beautiful women appear to the public, and therefore would so in the market, women be used as part of advertisement. But things are changing now. Of course, also mass media reflects the values of the dominant culture. Then we have workplace, which confirms one's adult status, because you have now become an adult and therefore you are working, and therefore this that reaffirmation that you are now an adult. Um, there is some also social interaction and togetherness and belongingness, or economic security at workplace, and therefore that itself is part of the socialization. For instance, you have that occupation, and therefore presenting you to the harsh reality that I have to work, or there is that ambition that this is what I have always wanted to do. Okay, so and therefore becomes part of reinforcement of what one needs or wants to become, but of course within a wider part of society. Religion, just like school, also reaffirms one's values and norms, and of course reinstituting some of the rites of passage, such as marriage rites, wedding. When you have to wedding, you have to do to wed someone, you have to formally go through the church as part of a formal institution, therefore reaffirming the traditional kinds of rites of passage. Or social interaction, bringing together all members because you fellowship together at church or at the mosque. Also reaffirming gender roles, basing on religious norms and values. For instance, you hear people say, okay, the Bible says that the woman be should respect the man, or the man should take care of their wives, or it is okay within the Islam religion that a man can marry many more wives than one. But while in the Christian values say that okay, man should have one wife. So you see all those differences. Okay, and the child learns that. We also have a state with a role that provides law and order, and therefore creates some kind of social control. We talked about, remember, we talked about the norms, which we classified as formal and informal. We have mores and folkways, and of course the state has the upper hand in providing these laws and control and regulating social order, and therefore controlling deviance and crime, as part of the reinforcement of what other agents of socialization have put forward. Okay, so but it also promotes freedom and rights of members of society, regardless of other aspects. But the family's protective functions shifts also steadily to external agencies such as hospitals and care centers established by the state. For instance, of course, here we do not have, in Africa we do not have most of this, but in the Western world there are those that when there are those health, care centers for adults, those who are past the retirement age, and those care homes are established by the state to take care of that. So that is the shift of role from family to the state, for instance. But of course, in Africa, the adults are taken care of by family members, which is the opposite when the state intervenes. So if we've said that socialization is a way of learning, how the way of life, then we could as well say that there is formal and informal education. Mainly formal takes place in school or other formalized structures, while informal takes place it's the happens every day as individuals try to acquire values and skills, and from family or neighbors or at work you can learn informally, you can learn things informally. But within an established institution such as schools, then there's that kind of specialized program such as this one, which you're studying to prepare you for particular occupations. Bottom line is that culture works on individuals in their everyday life, and formally or informally we learn how to live or be through socialization process influenced by many agents. And of course culture and socialization have an impact on social change, as we looked at it in the previous session. So these could be your discussion questions if you wish, for your individual learning. How does formal informal education improve character of members of society, or how does learning enhance social change, and what kind of education would you advocate for in Uganda or your own country, and why? So do you think it has any impact on our on social change or development So this is just food for thought. So that marks the end for this session, and thank you.